Hey, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you find yourself. You have arrived in the right place. My name is Sam Hill. I'm here with Matt Adair. You've arrived to training provided by the Rocket Company today on how to get more volunteers as we go into the fall season. Hard to believe fall is here, but it's pretty much here. So we're going to talk about how to get more volunteers rolling. Matt, say hi.
Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. Good to see you. Looking forward to spending time with you today and helping you develop volunteers, add more volunteers, everything volunteers today.
We are excited. We had almost 800, 900 registrations for this training. So if you're arriving today, we're just assuming that maybe you need some more volunteers in your church. Maybe you need to develop your volunteers a little bit more. Just maybe 800, 900 people saying, hey, I'd like to know how to develop volunteers. So that's exactly why we're here, is to meet that need. As you're coming into the webinar room today, I want you to do something really important, and that is identify where the chat box is. There should be a chat area. Go ahead and test it out by saying who you are and where you're from, so we know where you're tuning in from. And the chat box will be the place where you can put in questions for Matt as we go about volunteers. So any questions you have on developing volunteers, anything that Matt covers today, your challenges, all that kind of stuff, you're going to put it in the chat box. We're going to put Matt in the hot seat here in a little bit, and he's going to answer all those questions. And it's probably one of the best parts of the entire training is when Matt gets to answer your questions. So people are pouring in. Dan and Rich, Michael, Ashley, Phil, welcome. Heather, Clint is here. We are excited. We've got Canada, Tyler, Texas, Michigan, Florida, New Jersey. Always a world event when the Rocket Company puts on training on developing volunteers. So we're excited you're here. Alice and Terry, great. Rosemary's here. We have somebody from Belgium, South America, Kentucky, Indiana. Absolutely great. Pennsylvania, Joel, welcome. Glenn, welcome. Molly and Scott, we're glad that you're here. Listen, guys, we're going to begin in about 3 to 4 minutes or so. So as you're filing in, you've arrived in the right place. You've arrived at the Rocket Company's training. My name is Sam Hill. I'm a team leader at the Rocket Company. We have Matt Adair here with us. He is the volunteer guru expert on the face of the planet. If you need to develop more volunteers, you're in the right place. This guy knows how to do it. He knows how to recruit. He knows how to train. He knows how to retain volunteers. So you're in the right place. Introduce yourself in the chat box. If you're just arriving, tell us who you are. Tell us where you're located. And as we go, the chat box will be the area where you can put in questions about developing volunteers. Anything Matt covers today, challenges, obstacles you're facing. Today is a great day to put those questions, challenges into the chat box and get them answered by somebody who knows how to recruit and develop and retain volunteers. So we are pumped that you're here. We'll begin in about 2 to 3 minutes or so. Just tell us who you are, where you're tuning in from. We've got Brenda. We've got Italio from Costa Rica. Nick. This is great. Mike from Macon, Georgia. Go Dogs. Not that anybody's excited about football. Matt and I are both UGA fans. Just so you know, this may turn into a UGA pep rally real quick.
Black and red on today.
We're black and red. We coordinated it. You didn't realize that you're here at a UGA pep rally. Ann is here. Andy is here from Kingsport. Welcome, George and Dan. We are excited. Randolph. So almost 800, 900 people, somewhere in that range, registered for today's training. And, here's the deal. We know that you all need more volunteers. We know that the volunteers that you do have need to actually be developed so that they are useful and they can provide foundations for your church to grow and reach more people. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Matt's going to focus in on a couple things that he's used himself over the years to develop volunteers. And as we head into the fall, where people are busy, typically very busy, whether it be with family or school or whatever, you need volunteers that are in the game now more than ever as you head into the fall season. So we'll begin here in just a minute. If you're just joining us, I want to give you one last welcome. Welcome to our training on how to develop volunteers. My name's Sam Hill. I've got Matt Adair here with me, and we're going to talk today about developing volunteers. Familiarize yourself with the chat box. Jeremy's there. We've got somebody named That Harry Guy. We've got Tyler. We've got Blanca, Jason, Miguel, and Mike. So we are pumped that you are here. tell us who you are, where you're from, if you're just joining us, and be ready to actually put your questions into that chat box. Any question you've got about what Matt talks about volunteering, that's the kind of stuff we're going to cover. Matt is going to answer your questions when we put him in the hot seat later. So I'm going to ask Haley to go ahead and share the slide deck. We've got some training that we're going to roll through here. Focus, dial in. If you're joining us, turn off or airplane mode all your devices, turn off your emails and all that good stuff. Focus in 45 minutes to an hour or so. We're going to give you all we got to help you develop volunteers. I'm just excited that you're here because we know from the registrations that there are a ton of churches who need more volunteers. So our goal is this. Our goal today is that you leave with actual strategies you can implement like right now, right? Sunday's just a few days away, and fall is pretty much here, and so you need strategies right now. The Rocket Company, for over a decade, we've helped 10,000 plus churches all over the world grow their systems like how to recruit, how to develop, how to retain volunteers so that you can reach more people. So we're here today to invest in you. That is our goal. And if you stay to the end, all right, we asked Matt, our presenter, to just give us something to stay to the end. And in addition to answering tons of questions in the chat box, Matt is also going to give the #1 way that he gives ownership and leadership to key volunteers. So if you're a lead pastor, college pastor, youth pastor, no matter what way that you serve in the church, Matt's going to give you the way that he gives ownership and leadership to key volunteers. Here's what makes today different, okay? What makes today different is that we're here to invest in you. One of our great passions is pouring into you all. We know no matter what capacity that you serve in, you spend so much of your valuable time pouring out to others, right, and giving your time away. And we know that you're slammed and you have a ton going on. And so what makes this different is that we're here to invest in you, and most importantly, we're here to give you actual real systems that can impact your volunteer ministry today. Not later, but like today, right now. I want to just introduce myself. My name is Sam Hill. I'm a team leader at the Rocket Company. I've been in local church leadership for over a decade. My passion is helping church leaders actually enjoy ministry. Right? One of the things we've learned for over a decade, churches who have strong systems are churches who have leaders that enjoy what they do. And when you're enjoying ministry, you do it better, you reach more people, and it creates long-term health for your church and just an awesome culture. So that's my passion, and the Rocket Company's expression today is bringing in Matt Adair to talk to you about how to develop volunteers. Matt, take it away. Thanks for being here with us.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it. And if you're here and you're on this training, I'm really, really grateful that you're spending time with us today. I'm really honored to have the opportunity to help you in a critical area of your church, and that's developing volunteers for this fall. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually take myself off the screen and shut down my camera just so we can get on the slide deck, because I want you to lock in. I want you to be distracted by anything that I'm doing, because I tend to get into it and arms go all over the place. So I'm going to shut my camera down and just get into this presentation. I'm really, really looking forward to this. But as we get into this, why don't we talk a little bit about first a little bit of who I am if I don't know you, if I've never met you before. I'm the lead pastor of Christ Community Church in Athens, Georgia. I've been here since 2004, and sometimes on trainings like these, we can get the perception that maybe the guy giving the presentations doesn't understand where I'm at. So, when I got here to this church back in 2004, I basically walked into a church with about 35 adults, and it was a church that was pretty broken and busted up. And by God's grace, we've grown. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you, hey, I'm pastor of a megachurch. I'm a pastor of a healthy church of hundreds upon hundreds of people, but not a church of thousands upon thousands of people. And one of the things I think we've learned on this is that for a lot of you, you're pastoring, you're leading churches of hundreds, not thousands. And so I know where you are. I live in the world that you live in. So hopefully I can help you, because I'd love to help church leaders build great teams so they can build great churches. I do have 20 years of experience in church ministry. I've helped more than 60 churches in just the past year to design their leadership development system. And for those of you who who love baseball. I'm a fan of the Chicago Cubs, so unlike most years, I'm actually still paying attention to baseball. Usually by the first weekend of the season, I'm not, but I'm into it this year and having a great time. So I'm really, really grateful that you're here with us and excited about what we're doing today. But I want to just go ahead and give you a challenge that you must. If you are going to be the kind of leader you want to be, you must develop every volunteer in your church. We're not going to leave any volunteer behind. I think that's the goal. I think that's the challenge. That's the opportunity you have to develop every single volunteer in your church. Any man, woman, or child who invests any amount of time into the work of your church, then I think it's an opportunity and I think it's a responsibility for you to develop them, all right? Now, this is a lesson that I had to learn the hard way. So I've told you, I've been here at this church for 12 years, and I've done a lot of things right. You don't get to keep your job if you don't do some things right. But I've also done a lot of things wrong, and so some things that I had to learn the hard way. So let me give you 3 examples related to volunteers of things that I have done that weren't right. These were wrong things to do, and things and lessons I had to learn the hard way. I actually did one time threaten to cancel a Christmas Eve service because we didn't have enough nursery volunteers. And I don't think I said it in an angry way. I might have. I don't remember that. I just knew that I was frustrated because our volunteer team was doing as good of a job as they can about making sure we had enough people to take care of all the babies in the nursery on the Christmas Eve service, and we didn't want to go through the usual cycle of people who would always raise a hand and volunteer there, and so I did threaten to cancel a Christmas Eve service, and that wasn't a very good thing to do, okay? One of the other lessons I had to learn the hard way was that we assumed that volunteers know what to do. It's a nursery. There are kids there. At some point in time, they need to have a snack, and you'll figure it out. So thank you for volunteering, and away you go. And so that was a lesson that we had to learn the hard way. That's actually not a good thing to do. We're going to talk about that today. Another lesson that I had to learn the hard way was trying to do too much to develop volunteers, and maybe that's where you're stuck. You think that if you're going to do a good job, an effective job of developing volunteers, that you are going to have to do so much in order to cover all of your bases. Well, I'm telling you that one of the lessons that we learned is that's actually not the best way to develop volunteers. Now today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to help you see the easy way. You get to learn the easy way, all right? So if you want the easy way and not the hard way, why don't you go ahead and type 1 in the chat box. It's always good to have you engaged. And again, if you have questions as we're moving along, go ahead and ask those in the chat box, and we're going to have a couple of rounds of Q&A so that I can answer the specific questions you have and help you solve some of the problems and challenges you have in developing volunteers. Now, let me go ahead and say this up front before we jump in. I would say that my results are not typical, meaning I'm going to walk you through the system that my church has used to increase active leadership among volunteers by 800%, and we did that in just a pretty short span of about 18 months, okay? So I'm going to show you the exact system we use to make that happen. I'll also say this, that my results are not typical because the average person who attends any online training like this gets 0 results. The average person shows up, pays attention. Maybe right now you're multitasking and you're on Facebook and doing something else while you're paying attention to this, but you're not going to actually follow through. So I'm happy to share with you for absolutely free exactly what is working in churches right now. So I told you in the last year I've worked with more than 60 churches, from church plants to mega churches in over 8 different countries. I've helped them design their leadership development system that includes their volunteers. So I've picked up some things along the way. But I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that this is not for people who only collect ideas and never do anything with what they know. That's not my goal. I don't think that's your goal. That's not the Rocket Company's goal. Everybody who's coming on here, if we're going to all win together and succeed together, and if this is going to be effective and accomplish what we want to accomplish, then what we need is a commitment from everybody involved that we're going to take what we learn and we're going to put it into practice, all right? So let's talk about how to develop your volunteers this fall, and I want to share with you 3 secrets. These are 3 secrets that I have seen in our church, and 3 shifts in mindset and posture and perspective and action and behavior that I think that you can capitalize on that will help you develop volunteers this fall. So secret number 1 is to recruit without guilt. Secret number 2 is to focus on the first step. And secret number 3 is to do less, not more. Now, we're going to get into those, so if some of you are there taking notes, then don't worry. We're going to get into the details here. But let's talk about secret number 1. Secret number 1, as we talk about recruiting without guilt. Now, this is all about how you add more volunteers, and that's where some of us, maybe a lot of us are, as we walk into the fall, that we have opportunities as our church is growing perhaps, and we need to add more volunteers. Now, what I found is that most churches, and again, I've done this, most churches unintentionally guilt people into serving. I think we can all agree that nobody wants to make anybody feel guilty for not serving. But what happens is that when it looks like you're not going to have enough people to fill a particular role, that's frustrating. When you see the same people time and time and time again working in the nursery, working at a particular role. I use nursery examples a lot because we all have them. We all have to take care of babies in our churches. When you see the same people having to serve over and over again, it can get frustrating. And so because you see the opportunity and you see people who could be fantastic volunteers, but for whatever reason they don't want to engage, then you're trying to find every possible angle and avenue to get them involved. And I'm just going to tell you that guilt never gives you more than a short-term win. You might compel somebody to go and do a job for a season, but it's never going to be more than a short-term win. Here's what I mean. How do you feel when someone guilts you into doing anything? Not real good, right? So what happens in churches is that the first sign of trouble, so somebody goes ahead and they volunteers for a particular role. As soon as that gets difficult, as soon as they find themselves in a situation that isn't easy and enjoyable, volunteers either quit or they grow bitter. And so some of you, you've seen both. You've seen people that have started something and have just quit, kind of just dropped off. They've said, I'm not doing this anymore. Other people keep doing the job, but you could just see it becomes something that kind of eats them alive from the inside out. And they keep showing up, but they're not enjoying it. And they're making things not only difficult for themselves, but they're making the environment that they're working in not a very happy place. And so if we're compelling people and recruiting people by guilt, then that's what's going to happen. So what I'm telling you is that if you want more volunteers, you need to ask before you feel worried, okay? So bitter volunteer who was recruited by guilt was recruited by guilt because you got worried that you didn't have enough volunteers. And so you felt like the only solution was to guilt people in and put pressure on them to volunteer, but now you've actually created a little bit of a problem for yourself. So here's what I want you to do, okay? Before this becomes an issue, as we get past Labor Day here in the States, which is kind of our last bit of summer, then here's what I want you to do. Before September 1st, which, yes, I know that's tomorrow, so we're here. We said this. This is a no theory zone. This is all action, okay? So today, before tomorrow, I want you to ask every ministry team in your church, shoot an email, text, send a carrier pigeon, get on the phone, don't care how you do it. I want you to ask every ministry team how many volunteers they need. Okay? I want you to get a number. Now, you can say, look, get back to me in a week or whatever, but I want you to do this today. When we're done with this training, I want you to do this. And then before October 2nd, which if my math is right, that's a Sunday, show people the opportunities and share the benefits of service. We can call this a volunteer push, that you basically say, hey, we need this many volunteers on these teams doing these roles. But when you do that, make sure you help them see those clear opportunities, but share the benefits of serving. It's a great practice for us to help people understand and see the benefits. This is what you get from serving, not just the details about what it looks like to serve, okay? So let's go ahead and agree on that now, that what you're going to do is you're going to ask every ministry team in your church how many volunteers they need, and before October 2nd, you are going to show people on at least one Sunday during one weekend, you're going to show people in your church, here are the opportunities for you to serve, and you're going to share the benefits of service, and you're going to ask them to engage. And then, at a later date, you're going to thank everyone publicly who volunteers during your push. You can read off a list of names, you can show it on a screen, you can do whatever, but you want to publicly thank everybody who commits to volunteering during that push, okay? So that's your call to action. That's what you need to do if you want to recruit without guilt. Before you get overrun and before you freak out and before you're so consumed with worry that you start guilting people into volunteering, do this, what you're seeing on screen right now, okay? So that's the first secret. And again, if you have questions, get them in the chat box. I'll answer them here in a minute. But before we do that, let's jump into secret number 2, focusing on the first step. This is all about starting with the end in mind. This is all about how you don't just get volunteers started, but you keep them and retain them for a long time. Now, most church leaders put volunteers right to work, okay? So Miss Sally signs up to work in the nursery last Sunday, and this Sunday you have her working in the nursery, okay? We're going to put her to work. She said she wanted to, so we're just going to oblige her, and we're going to let her do it. So, but I'm going to tell you that actually the key to long-term volunteers, because unless you're crazy, you want to not just blow through a ton of different volunteers. If somebody volunteers for a role, you'd like to have them for a long time. You'd like to be able to recognize them on their 25th anniversary of serving on a particular team. That would be great, right? If you're going to do that, if you're going to have long-term volunteers, the key is doing just the opposite, meaning you're not going to just put them to work. Here's what I mean by that. Every new volunteer feels like an outsider. I don't care how long they've been in your church. To go back to the nursery illustration, I don't care if they are a parent. I don't care if they have babies. I don't care if they used to have babies. Every new volunteer feels like an outsider because there are things that every single volunteer team does that is particular, that is maybe different from another church, or maybe different from an environment, period. So, you know, if you go into the baby nursery, then yes, there are different ways that different churches are going to handle crying babies. If you get in with the toddlers, you're going to have a particular way and a particular time that you're going to serve the watered-down Kool-Aid and the goldfish, all those type of things, right? So every new volunteer feels like an outsider, and too many churches assume that volunteers know what to do because the environment is familiar enough. So you have somebody that walks onto your finance team, and you assume that because this person seems smart with money, that they know how to read a set of financials. But when a volunteer is confused or unclear, then cognitively, their brain tells them to back off, to not be fully engaged, because nobody likes to look silly, nobody likes to look foolish, and so people disengage, at least mentally, if not physically, meaning that they're not going to hang in there for very long, because nobody likes to walk into a situation where they don't feel like they're in control. They don't like to walk into a situation feeling like an outsider. Nobody likes to walk into any situation in which they don't understand exactly what's asked of them. Do you? So, if you want to help your volunteers focus on the first step, then you need to take time to help every single volunteer in your church get started well, and to do that in 2 ways, okay? If you want to help your volunteers get started well, the first thing you need to do is to walk them through a very simple job description. Now, when I mean job description, what I'm talking about, if nothing else, if you're going to do this right, then make sure that every single volunteer in your church knows what it looks like for them to win in their job. And I find that that's usually comes down to just 2 or 3 bullet points, not the 1 or 2 page length job descriptions that list and details every single responsibility and everything we've ever thought about that role so that we as an organization cover our bases. That's a good thing. Don't hear me saying it's a bad thing. I just don't think it's the most significant thing for your volunteers. What your volunteers need to know more than anything, they need to have somebody sit down with them and walk them through a simple job description where they're told and where they understand exactly what it looks like for them to win and succeed. So in the nursery, when kids show up, we expect them to have fun, to stay safe, to learn about Jesus, and to be put back in the hands of their parents. There's the job description, okay? Is there more details that we could talk about? Yes, but I want to make sure that they don't miss the very, very simple basics of what it looks like to succeed. If you do that with all of your volunteers, that's going to be a very good thing. Another good thing you can do to help them start well is to let them actually watch before they participate. So before somebody jumps into the baby nursery, let them sit in a corner in a rocking chair and kind of see what everything happens, but you don't give them any responsibilities. Let them be in with the 4 and 5-year-olds, but let them pass out stuff for crafts, but they have no responsibility for doing anything. You have your bases covered with other volunteers, but you're allowing them to observe, you're allowing them to try before they buy. And so this is also fantastic because not everybody who volunteers is actually going to be a good fit. So by creating kind of a buffer, this observation period, this one Sunday where they're checking it out before they actually get involved, then you give them a pretty easy way to back out if it's not a good fit for them, or if it becomes obvious to you for whatever reason that they're not a good fit for that role, then it enables you to move them out fairly quietly as well, all right? If you walk people through a simple job description, if you let them watch before they participate, if you focus on the first step and help people start well, you're setting yourself up for long-term success. More importantly, you're setting them up for long-term success because there's a reason they volunteer. They want to help. They want to be part of what you're doing in the church, and you're doing a fantastic job by helping them do the very thing they want to do. If you'll do two basic things, walking them through the job description, letting them watch before they participate. Super smart strategy if you'll implement that. All right, let's talk secret 3 here, okay? Do less, not more. That's it's kind of vague, right? Let's not make it vague anymore. This is all about how to execute a simple and sustainable leadership development strategy. That's a lot of words. Look, most church leaders think they have to do more. That's what happens to a lot of us because leading a church is difficult. Even though we have the Bible, it leaves a lot of room for us to interpret and apply how to lead well. And so one of the strategies that I see a lot of church leaders do, and again, I told you earlier, I've done some of this myself, is that we just stack thing upon thing because we think at some point in time, quantity is going to be the way to success. But the truth is, your church gets ahead with volunteers by doing less. Here's what I mean. What volunteers need from you, and if you were in the South, I would say from y'all in the church, volunteers need consistency. And what your church needs from you as the leader is consistency. So guess what you need to do this fall? You need to provide consistency for your church, and so I'm going to help you with that. I'm going to give you a simple and sustainable development process for your volunteers. I'm just giving this to you for free. This is the kind of stuff, quite honestly, guys, that people are paying me a lot of money to help them build and design in their church, okay? I'm just going to give this to you for free. So take good notes and ask your questions. All right, step 1, you need to recruit new volunteers. Now, we've said that you could do that in any number of ways. You could do that through a personal ask and ask all the people you know. You can recruit volunteers through a volunteer push like we talked about, where you find out here are all the volunteer needs that we have in our church, and we want to encourage you to get involved. You can put something in your bulletin, in your worship guide, whatever it is that you put in the hands of people where they can week in, week out, mark a box that says volunteer, where they're just getting information on opportunities to serve. You absolutely have to go and get in there and recruit new volunteers. You can't wait until you have other volunteers leaving. You cannot wait until you get behind. You need to be consistently recruiting new volunteers and creating a system and a process for you to be doing that consistently, because that's our word here, okay? Step number 2, training new volunteers. I'm going to give you the exact things you need to do to train your volunteers. I love this. You need to create a way to walk them through that job description and to give them an observation period, okay? So if you're going to train new volunteers consistently, you have to help them take a first step. You have to help them navigate the minefield of not knowing what to do in this role by helping them take the first step that doesn't allow them to step on a mine and hurt themselves and others, especially the children. So make sure you do that walkthrough. Here's what it looks like to succeed in your role. And give them an observation period to look and see the culture that exists on any one of your teams, okay? Secondly, you want to check in each month this fall, at least once a month. If they have a team leader, that team leader is going to check in with them. And you can do this, again, over the phone, through text, on Facebook Messenger, in person, over coffee, any of this, and you're going to ask 2 questions. 2 questions. That's it. Question 1, how are you? And then listen. Treat them like a human being. Care about them as a person created in the image of God. Care about them more for who they are than what they can do for your church, okay? How are you? That's question number 1. And question number 2 is, how can I help you? okay? Because if you are a leader, then your primary role with your volunteers is to create an environment for them to thrive and to create an environment for them that where when you see that they have a problem or there's an opportunity that needs to be seized or there's a lack of ability, competency that needs to be developed in them, when they tell you, hey, this is what I need help with, guess what? That's the thing that you need to focus on and develop, okay? So it's going to give you kind of on-the-ground information about how you need to help your volunteers so they don't get frustrated or so they continue to grow and develop that. Just those two simple questions. How are you and how can I help you? You get so much mileage out of that. And most importantly, you treat them like human beings. The third way that you train new volunteers, if you're going to train new volunteers consistently, do one training event before the holidays. And again, I'm speaking stateside, thinking that Thanksgiving kind of Christmas rhythm. Do one training event where you get everybody together and you focus on one thing. I'm going to go ahead and give you the topic here. Why we do what we do. That's what you're talking about. Don't get too deep into tactics and strategies and what's in house. Focus on why. Bring all of your volunteers in, and if you can cast a compelling vision for why we do what we do as a church, then the difficulties and the challenges of what we do and how we do it are not going to be eliminated, but they're going to be minimized. And the difficulties and the disagreements that we have one another when we work together as a church are going to fall under this umbrella of why we do what we do. And we may not agree on how to get there, and we may not completely agree on what we should do, but we all know we're going in the same direction. You do one training event before the holidays for all of your volunteers. You check in each month. You walk through and give them an observation period as you get started. Then you've done a fantastic job in training new volunteers. And then step number 3, encourage new volunteers. I'm going to encourage you to do 2 things, okay? I'm going to encourage you to do 2 things in order to encourage your volunteers. Number 1, handwritten notes. Every single new volunteer in your church should get at least one handwritten note from the senior pastor. And if you're not the senior pastor, then you have some work to do to convince the senior pastor that they need to do this. It's a powerful tool to have somebody take the time to write by hand, thank you for doing what you're doing. You're making a ton of difference in our church. The second thing to do, have a volunteer appreciation day before the end of the year, okay? Make it a Christmas party. I don't care what you do, but have a volunteer appreciation day. Have a way that you tangibly express your gratitude for the work that people are giving. It doesn't take long if you start adding up the number of hours that volunteers put into your church for you to recognize this is really an amazing gift that people are giving us by giving us their time. Because you know what? They can give us their money, and they're going to get more money back at some point in time. If they give us their time, they're not getting that time back. They're choosing to put money and invest time into your church. That's a huge thing. All right, now look. When I look at those 3 steps, that's not hard. It is not complicated. It's pretty simple, right? If you want to develop leaders, you recruit volunteers, you train volunteers, and you evaluate volunteers. You encourage them, okay? That's what you do. What if you just did that year after year? What if you just recruited new volunteers and trained new volunteers, walkthroughs and observation periods and connecting with them and doing training events on occasion, finding ways to encourage people in real ways? You'd probably be pretty healthy in terms of your volunteer culture, right? So I guess my question is, why aren't you doing this right now? You see, there's probably a lot of what I just said that's not really new information for you. You've probably heard a lot of that before. I'm not going to claim to be some kind of genius. But what I do want to encourage and maybe press you on is, if you know this already, why aren't you doing it? And so let's agree that we want to be people who actually execute on some simple basic strategies. That if we'll just put one foot in front of the other, we're going to succeed and we're going to go where we want to go, okay? So again, guys, those 3 secrets of focusing on how we recruit, train, and encourage our volunteers is going to be gold for you this fall as you develop your volunteers. So again, I'm really interested and engaged on what kind of questions we've had come in, and so get them in right now because we're about to jump into Q&A, and I'll go deep dive on you here if I need to. But any questions you have about anything that I've said about developing volunteers, let's get them in and let's jump in and answer some of these questions.
Matt, this is awesome, man. And thank you. We've got a ton of great questions. You all, if you still got them, continue to put them in. And I'm going to toss it over to Haley to give Matt some hard ones, Haley. Give him the hard ones.
All right, Matt, we've got some great questions that have come in today. The first one is from Teresa, and she wants to know, when you do the big push to have more volunteers, would you suggest focusing on one ministry at a time so that you don't overwhelm people, or would you go ahead and push for all of your ministry needs at one time?
I push for all of them unless there's a specific need. Like, I'll give you an example of a specific one. So I pastor here in Athens, Georgia, which is the home of the University of Georgia, and so every summer we lose a lot of our nursery volunteers because there are a lot of college students, and so we do a specific nursery push that we do kind of in the spring so that make sure that we're covered for the summer. So that would be an example of doing one. But when we do our fall volunteer push, which we just finished last Sunday, then it's everything.
Great. Okay, well, this is a question coming from Ashley. She says, I agree with the idea of letting volunteers watch other people before they participate, but what if you're starting a brand new ministry from scratch and there are no current leaders for them to observe?
Yeah, I would say let's recognize something here, that what I am telling you is theoretically sound, and it is ideal, and that you and I live in a broken world in which we don't always get the ideal, and so we have to apply this to the realities of our situation. So, Ashley, my assumption is that your gut instinct tells you, hey, we're going to have to figure this out together, and we're not going to be able to have an observation period. I would agree with that assessment, and I would say just make sure you communicate that to anybody getting started, and don't assume that that person knows more than they do. You might just want to tell everybody, hey, this is a brand new ministry, none of us know anything, so we're all going to have to figure it out together. So let's take care of each other, let's ask good questions, let's assume the best of the other person, and I think you'll be fine there.
Great. Okay, well, this is coming from Julie. She says, everyone in our culture is already so overcommitted with things. What's the most effective way to cast vision on the importance of getting involved in ministry?
I think, again, you cast a big vision for why about what we're doing. There are a lot of good things that we can do in this world, but my hope is that we're able to capture and cast a vision for the value of the local church in the world in which we live in, as an opportunity for us to make Jesus impossible to ignore. Which is as good as all the things that we are involved in. Because from where I stand, I'm not looking at the church versus the world. I'm looking at a church that loves the world and invests in the world, even though we're very distinct and different. But if we can cast a vision that compels people to say, out of the 168 hours in my week, I want to give my time to the church and not give it to something else. And if I can cast that big why and then continue to help them see the benefits of what they're doing, the benefits that exist for them by serving, and the benefits in the way that they change lives in serving, then I think you're going to give people a good opportunity. Like, I can't change myself, so I certainly can't change anybody else, but I think if you do that, you're going to give people a real opportunity to see their lives change and to make a difference in the lives of others.
Great. This is from Rick and Ryan, and they asked, how do you deal with volunteers that are not members of your church? Do you think that someone should attend your church for a certain amount of time before you allow them to volunteer?
I think it depends on the role, and I think every church is going to answer that a little bit differently. I know for us that we don't demand that somebody becomes a covenant member in our church before they serve. We think that there's something valuable about belonging to a group of people, maybe before you buy in to that. And I think there's a mind shift that happens in membership where I think before somebody's a member, they look at a church and go, hey, what's in it for me? I think genuine membership, if you're reading it biblically, is basically a shift in your mindset and your posture that says, hey, I'm not just thinking about what's in it for me, I'm actually thinking about how I can help make this better for other people. I do think that that's a mind shift that I don't want to necessarily wait for, because sometimes I think being involved in ministry and volunteering will actually help people see the opportunity and give them the reason why they want to become a member in the first place. So you got to do what you want to do, but that's been our perspective, is that there are very few places where we won't allow somebody to be a volunteer.
Great. Joel asks, in addition to a background check, do you have a time frame on how long you would say someone needs to attend before they work with minors?
I know for us, we don't have a timeline. A lot of that's because we have college students. The background check is vital, and there's no way. Okay, let's free ourselves from the curse of believing that there's somehow that we can know that we 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 know that this person's safe. We can't. I think we have to rely on the tools that we have. And if you want to put a buffer in there, cool. I don't know. I don't know if there's any conventional wisdom about a length of time that it would take. Again, I think what we know about from abuse statistics and stories is that most people are abused by somebody they know. So a length of time may or may not even be helpful.
Right. Okay, well, last one for right now, and then we'll have lots more in our second Q&A time. But Rick wants to know, when you do the training meeting that you suggested, should it be for all volunteers at one time, or do you do that by individual ministries?
I just get everybody in the room, and I think there's something about everybody being together. You want to make that a celebration, and when I say celebration, I think every church and every culture is a little bit different, so it needs to feel real for you. So if you're kind of quiet and subdued, then don't go over the top. But if you're crazy and over the top the whole time, then go crazy. But yeah, get everybody in a room together. I think there's just real big value in having all of your volunteers together at once.
Matt, this is great. Hey, don't forget, everybody on the webinar, if you stay to the end, just a few minutes, Matt's going to give you the #1 way that he gives ownership and leadership to key volunteers. We're also going to do more Q&A, all right? So if you still got a question, feel free to put it in the chat box. We'll do a few more questions and answers here. Matt, I got a question for you, man. You know, something that you said that really, really spoke to me. You talked about short-term wins versus long-term wins. You said that, and I think that's so critical because almost everybody, when you're dealing with volunteers, it feels like there are so many short-term needs, and so it's hard to focus on the long-term. But talk about how important systems and processes are for you, your church, everything that you've talked about today to get on a long-term trajectory, because, I mean, it's really hard to get off the short-term win, hamster wheel, right? And you can just continue to spin and spin and spin. So how important are implementing systems that you can fall back on, lean on, stuff like job descriptions, that most churches don't even have written, that kind of thing. Just talk about how important those are relative to getting on a long-term path.
Nothing in this life goes the way that you plan it. Can we agree on that? And so you have one of two options. One is that when things don't go the way you want them to go, with volunteers perhaps, you can either try to reinvent the wheel and start from scratch and just go by the seat of your pants, proverbially, or you can have a system in place, believing that there is no perfect system and no perfect process. And nothing that I've said, and I don't think what anybody would say, hey, there is such thing. But it is so beneficial to have something to go back to that's reliable, that's stable, that has been put in place for the long haul, and that's what a good system and process does. Even when you struggle, even when you fail, even when things don't completely go the way you want to, you can trust in something you've put in place to take you from here to where you want to go long term.
I love it. Hey, listen, I hope today's training's been helpful so far. Let's show Matt a little bit of love here. Put a 1 in the chat box, the #1, if something that Matt has said, even one thing, can impact your volunteer ministry. What we want to do is give you the opportunity to get more. We want to give you the opportunity to get on a long-term trajectory, because here's the thing. Listen, old habits die hard, right? And a lot of times we can think, hey, we'll just do a 45-minute training session and we'll go back and make a serious change. Look at all these ones, Matt. I love it. Just ones flying in. That is awesome. That is awesome. So what I want to do, you're going to be excited, you're going to be thrilled, you're going to be filled with hope, because we're going to give you a step-by-step process system opportunity called Volunteer Rocket. What's Volunteer Rocket? It is a step-by-step system. It's a process for you to gain, train, and retain volunteers. It's our core coaching program we developed at the Rocket Company, over 10,000 churches, over a decade of serving churches, the things that we've learned. Let me tell you exactly what the Volunteer Rocket includes. It includes 12 coaching videos. So if today was beneficial, like all these ones in there, with somebody coaching you, that's exactly what Matt's been doing. He's been coaching you on how to grow your volunteer ministry. Well, there's 12 coaching videos, 1 per month, in the Volunteer Rocket that you and your volunteer leadership can all go through together on their own schedule. There's a case study vault, right? There's interviews with church leaders from North Point Church. There's case studies from Church of the Highlands. You can see what other churches are doing in volunteer ministry. There's an online community so that you can actually interact with other churches that are maybe same size as you, same season as you, and you can see what they're doing and talk about it in the community. And then maybe one of my favorite things, our resource vault that's included with Volunteer Rocket includes things like checklists, sermons, volunteer job descriptions. I mean, and there are 100 volunteer job descriptions included. 100. There's a 30-day new volunteer checklist. There's phone scripts, done-for-you emails, ready to go to send off so you can build out your systems. A total value over $2,300. Let me tell you who this is for, okay? Because this is crucial that you understand who this is for. If you, here's the thing about what Matt said. If you're desperate for more volunteers and you deal with the whole guilt thing, the more guilty you feel, the less volunteer recruiting you're going to do, right? If you got volunteers, but they're not doing the right stuff. They don't know the first steps, right? That's what Matt's saying. They're confused. You've thrown people into ministry positions, but they don't really know what they should be doing, right? And so there's confusion. And you've even, maybe you're a church who says, look, we just need long-term health. We got a lot of people in the mix. I saw somebody put in earlier. They got a lot of people in the mix, but it seems like there's not a lot of people actually participating. This is what the Volunteer Rocket is designed to do. Look, it is a step-by-step system. You can watch it with your team. You can download the checklist and use it. There are coaching videos. It'd be like having Matt in your church once a month, walking you and your key team members, your volunteer leaders through coaching modules on how to recruit, how to train, and how to retain volunteers. Here's some examples of the modules, okay? I love them. How to recruit and how to attract volunteers, how to drive your leadership system, all right? Matt's going to share a pointer in just a minute. How to attract volunteers, how to train volunteers, how to organize your volunteer ministry. Each module, 12 are include coaching videos, resources that go with it. You can listen to it on the go, mobile enabled. Look, here's what you're going to get. All these videos, case study vault, online community. You've got things like phone scripts to thank volunteers, 12 done for you encouraging emails, 12 once a month, an email ready to go that you can fire off to your team. Family ministry, volunteer application, just unbelievable resources, all the things that you need to recruit and develop and retain your volunteers. And listen, this is normally $997 program. It's worth $2,300 all day long. It'd be like having Matt come into your church for the next year every month, training you and your team, coaching just like he's done, and it's normally $997. But we've got a webinar special today only for 20 churches. The Rocket Company is known for high touch, high interaction. Today's webinar special, you can get Volunteer Rocket for $69 a month. $69 a month. I mean, look, go to volunteerrocket.com, 20 churches, and you get access to everything that we've talked about. Volunteerrocket.com, $69 a month for 20 churches today. And listen to this, if you sign up by the end of the webinar, okay, so in the next 15, 30 minutes, give or take, we're going to give you our fast action bonus, a small group system, which are separate coaching modules, separate resources, all devoted to developing your small group systems leadership within your church, $639 value for churches that sign up by the end of the webinar. Look, here's what you're going to get in addition to the coaching videos, the study, the online community resource vault, the fast action bonus. Everything is included, over $3,000 of value for only $69 a month. I want you to think about this for a second, okay? Look, volunteerrocket.com, $69 a month, which comes out to $17 a Sunday. Think about how important your volunteer ministry is. Think about all the people that are needed, all the checklists that are needed, all the job descriptions that are needed, all of the forms that are needed, all of the applications that are needed, all the emails you need to send, right? Do you think it's worth $17 a Sunday to have done for your resources and some of you on how to implement them? $69 a month, and you have a system, a process, so that you're not just looking for short-term wins. That's the question that you need to ask yourself. Whatever leadership capacity you find yourself in at your church, Are you setting up the volunteer ministry for short-term wins, or are you implementing systems that everybody can gather around, everybody can buy into and implement, done for you, so that you can set up a long-term health, a long-term trajectory for your volunteer ministry? Matt, I want to get you back in the hot seat here. Go to volunteerrocket.com and just scroll through the modules, and let's do a little bit more Q&A here with Matt Adair. Haley, go ahead and fire off a few questions to Matt.
All right, Matt, this is coming to you from Meredith, and she wants to know if a volunteer is willing to serve every Sunday, would you schedule them that often, or how do you know when someone is being stretched too thin?
I think it's really important for a church to decide how often they think is a healthy rhythm, number one. Number two, we're not people's parents, unless it is your kid. We're not people's parents, and so we can't demand what they do, but I'd be pretty intentional about checking in on them and not expecting them to keep up that pace long term. But if somebody's in a season where they just find a lot of joy in serving in a particular way, I don't want to necessarily tell them no, but I want to help them understand why we schedule people out as often as we do, and I want to check in with them often.
Great. Well, Danya wants to know what methods of communication with volunteers have worked well for you.
I think we want to make it as easy as possible for them. So I think we want to find, in general, what's going to be most easy. I would say probably the basis from what I know with our team is that there's a lot of texting that's going on, and so I think that's the primary way we want to communicate, particularly in that connect phase. And then I think as people have their team, and we try to not make teams too big, so you can get to know people a little bit. So therefore, you can kind of know that if they prefer to sit down over coffee, and if that's feasible and doable, then do that. But I think there's a lot of value that's just in that quick interpersonal communication. But I think you do need to learn from other people, because some people aren't going to feel that. They're not going to feel appreciated if all you're doing is texting them.
Great. Tina wants to know what's the best way to get volunteers to attend a training session, since it takes them away from their families on one more day or night.
Yeah, I think again it just goes back to benefits, and number one. Number two is part of just going, this is kind of what we do and how we do it, telling them way in advance, getting that thing on the books early, letting them know on August 31st that, hey, we have a training event on October 20th, and making sure they know it's early, making them know that it's just part of the gig, and then making sure you communicate the benefits of being part of this event, and communicating that you understand that time is precious and valuable, and so we wouldn't take up your time if we didn't feel like it was a great investment on you. And then make sure you create an event that doesn't waste people's time.
Okay, this one is from Jeanette, and she wants to know if someone signs up and says that they're willing to serve wherever they're needed, would you recommend them taking a gift assessment to see where they would best fit, or just letting them view all the ministries they could serve in and letting them choose?
I come back and give them three options, based on what you know of the person. I think gifts assessments, we do a real basic, we use one leadership assessment for a lot of our people, but I think you come back with just a few options based on what you know of them and see what they take, and just encourage them to take one. Sometimes people have a hard time choosing from a list of everything, so just keep whittling it down. And then if it really feels like they're just willing to serve wherever, then put them in the place where you feel like you have the most need that doesn't require a particular skill set if you don't know what their skill set is. So if there's a huge need on the finance team, but you're not sure if they can balance their checkbook, probably don't want them there.
All right. How do you deal with sin in your volunteers if it's something that doesn't directly relate to the role that they're serving in?
So I would say that in our culture in our church, we believe that everybody, including the lead pastor, is a sinner that's in desperate need of grace. Okay, so we don't have anything in our church other than sinners and strugglers, and I don't mean that kind of to throw shade at you and your church. What I hear you saying though, so let me, having said that, go into where there are particular instances of sin. I think that there are probably certain roles in which certain actions preclude them from serving in that role. As those things come along, I would deal with it well and deal with it biblically. But I would just say that if we expect people to be acing the moral exam, we're going to find that there are a shrinking number of people who are going to be able to serve in our church. And so that's kind of my general question. That's one of those that I'd love to be sitting across the table, drinking coffee with somebody to get into more of the details.
All right, and last question for now, Matt. This is from Jeanette. She says, we have a lot of people who are signed up to serve on our connection team. However, a small number of those actually serve on the team. So how would you recommend getting those other people actually engaged?
Yeah, I'd want to kind of go back in and see what your process is from somebody indicating they want to serve and then actually serving, and then finding out kind of where's the breakdown in the process. When we see that kind of gap, I know where my heart goes. My heart says I want to blame all those sorry people for not following through on their commitment. What we've tried to do is to resist that tendency and to go back and go, so what are we not doing in terms of our job of persuading people to follow through on their willingness to raise a hand and express interest.
Matt, it's great, man. Hey, I want to ask you something else too that you mentioned a little bit, talk some about. In the Volunteer Rocket, we've got things like case studies. Okay, so somebody comes to a training like this, and they basically get coaching from you for an hour, and basically they're hearing a case study. They're hearing the stuff that you do at your own church, which is so helpful. How important has that been for you to actually devote time to installing systems when it comes to volunteers? Because here's the thing, when it comes to preaching, when it comes to, the worship team, I mean, we all take it really seriously, you know what I mean? But when it comes to volunteers, it's like, we just need more people. Let's go ahead and throw them in the positions. Just talk about how important it is for you to have learned from other churches, take it seriously, have a process in place, and not just willy-nilly fire from the hip.
I think we all want to do a good job. We do recognize the difficulties. Volunteers are like small groups, which is why that fast action bonus for small group system is great. No church has figured out perfectly how to do volunteers. So I think when we all work together, when we all learn in terms of here's what's working well for us right now, when we're all kind of working as a community, it's great. So what a system does is it allows you to learn from a lot of other churches and allows you to take the best of what different churches do and to filter it through your culture and system. So I think for volunteers it's important because it's important, but it doesn't usually feel urgent until the wheels fall off, and that's a bad place to pay attention to it. So by having a system in place, you're consistently, to go back to that word I used in the training, you're consistently helping people step by step in your organization, step by step by step, continue to do a good job of not only meeting the needs that you have in serving people in your church, you're also doing right by your volunteers, and that's something I think most churches forget.
I love it. Everybody, go to volunteerrocket.com and you can check out our offer. And here's what you're going to get. Coaching videos, what we just did with Matt, you get 12 of those every single month. Keep you on track. Somebody mentioned earlier, hey, if you want to, how do you not bite off too much? Basically, what's the question? And the answer is you focus on one thing at a time. So you got coaching videos for each month. You've got a case study vault, just like we've done with Matt. You can see what other churches are doing. And online communities, you can interact with other church leaders, just like you've been doing in the chat room today. And you've got the resource vault where you've got checklists, sermons, job descriptions, done for you, emails, phone scripts, a ton of other stuff. Go to volunteerrocket.com, over $3,000 of value, but look, today, $69 for 20 churches. That is the offer, $69, $17 a Sunday is what it comes out to, just absolute no-brainer. And Matt, let's go ahead, man. Give them the state of the end here. We promised them that you give them the number one way that you give ownership and leadership to key volunteers. Go ahead and dish that out, my friend.
Yeah, I think there's just been a consistent process that we've tried to use over the last several years. We really kind of turned the way we think organizationally upside down. So when it comes to decisions, instead of being a top-down organization, we said we very much want a bottom-up organization, which means we have to give real control for real decisions to volunteers. I actually make very few decisions in our church at this point. And so in order to do that, if you're going to give control to people, so we're going to go alliteration here, all C's. If you're going to give control to people, then you are responsible as leaders in your church for doing two things. One, you must give them clarity. Without clarity, they're going to make bad decisions. If you don't make it clear about what decisions they're responsible for, and about clarity about what your church's vision and mission is, what your team's vision and mission is, that's going to go bad for you. Also, in addition to making sure you're clear, you've got to focus on competencies. You have to have an understanding of what are the handful of things that all of our volunteers need to do well and continue to develop them. So I'm going to go ahead and give you, this is even bonus on the bonus, I'm going to go ahead and give you, these are the competencies that we focus on for our volunteers in our church. They need to be self-aware, responsible, they need to be able to get things done, and they need to be resilient. Those are the 4 things for us when we look at a volunteer and go, if that's happening with all of our volunteers, then we're going to have a fantastic leadership culture in our church. So if you're going to give them control, you have to give them clarity, and you have to focus on helping them develop their competencies.
That is fantastic, because here's the thing, everybody. Listen, what Matt's saying is go bottom up, not top down. Well, guess what? Until you have resources, until you have a place where you can point your key volunteers, that'll never happen. Okay, let me just say that again. Until you have something for your key leaders and your volunteers to lean on, such as coaching videos, such as resources you can put in their hands, it's always going to be top down, right? The buck is always going to stop with you. You're always going to have to fill in the gap. There are always $69 a month you can invest at volunteerrocket.com and have that central location, community, coaching, case studies, coaching videos, resources to point them to, so that you can develop a bottom-up type of culture, a bottom-up volunteer structure. Until you've got systems in place that everybody can lean on, it will never, ever be bottom-up. It'll only be top-down, because there's only so much time in the day, and that's what we found for over a decade now, serving 10,000-plus churches. We know how busy you stay. We know that emails to your volunteers is probably not going to get done consistently, right? Matt said the key word, consistency, to recruiting, developing, and retaining volunteers. VolunteerRocket.com, take 1 minute of your time and go to VolunteerRocket.com and look at the system that's included. Today also, small group systems are thrown right in, a $639 coaching program all about small groups included today at no cost, for free. Can you say for free? Absolutely. $69 a month, volunteerrocket.com, for 20 churches today. We are so excited that you've been with us. Again, almost, I think, 800 to 900 people registered for our training today. We know that you need volunteers, but we know the bridge, the support system that will help you get more volunteers, train them so they do great work, and keep them in the long haul. We know from our experience for the past decade, it is all about the systems that you have in place. That's exactly what you can get at volunteerrocket.com. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Sam Hill. I'm a team leader at the Rocket Company. You've been listening to Matt Adair talk about how to develop volunteers as we head into the fall. It is go time, and we're so excited you're here. We'll see you on our next training. Thanks again. Talk to you soon.